Imagine a world where kings tremble, not before armies, nor before ramparts, but before a single woman. A world where the fate of entire nations turned because of a word spoken at the right moment, a glance, a single act of courage carried out by those thought to be powerless. You have been told the Bible as the story of men, the patriarchs, the kings, the prophets. But behind nearly every one of them stood a woman whose influence sometimes surpassed that of the greatest sovereigns. Some saved entire peoples. Others brought down dynasties. One of them even tried to erase God from the memory of an entire nation. And at the very top of this list hides a young girl from Nazareth, without a throne, without an army, whose single word, just one, changed the course of humanity more than all the empires combined. 15 women. 15 destinies. From the most brutal power to the most silent strength. Stay until the end. Power takes 1,000 faces. There is the power of weapons, the power of thrones and crowns. But there is also the power of faith, the power of courage, the power of cunning, and sometimes the terrible power of a simple refusal. In this video, we are going to count down the 15 most powerful women in all the Bible. We will start from number 15, and we will climb step by step up to the one who holds the very first place. At each stage, power will grow, will change in nature, will become more dizzying. You will meet queens and prophetesses, heroines and criminals. For power, in the Bible, is not always synonymous with goodness. Some of these women used their strength to save, others to destroy. But all left a mark that the centuries have never managed to erase. Get ready, for some will inspire you, and others will chill you to the bone. Let us begin our countdown. Number 15, Vashti, the queen who dared to say no. It all begins in the palace of Susa, at the heart of the Persian Empire, the vastest the world had then known. King Ahasuerus organizes a banquet that lasts for days. The wine flows endlessly. And at the height of his drunkenness, the king orders that Queen Vashti be brought to display her beauty before his drunken guests. But Vashti does the unthinkable. She refuses. Understand the magnitude of this act. In that world, the word of the king was the law. To disobey him was to risk death. And yet, this woman preferred to lose her crown rather than her dignity. She refused to be reduced to a mere object of display. The scandal is immense. The king's counselors panic. If the queen defies the king, they say, all the women of the empire will follow her example. Vashti is at once deposed, banished, erased from the throne. And yet her refusal still echoes. For true power is not always to command. Sometimes it consists in saying no, even when everything pushes you to yield. Vashti lost a kingdom, but she kept her honor. What she did not know was that her fall would open the door to another woman, more cunning still, who would change the destiny of an entire people. But before we get there, let us descend into another royal court, where a princess will be torn between love and the throne. Number 14, Michal, the princess prisoner of her own blood. She was a king's daughter. Michal, the daughter of King Saul, possessed by birth a power that few women knew. And she fell in love with the greatest hero of her time, the young David, the one who had struck down the giant. Their story could have been a legend of love. It began that way. When Saul, devoured by jealousy, sent his men to kill David in his sleep, it was Michal who saved him. She let him down through a window in the night, placed an idol in his bed to deceive the soldiers, and thus gave him the time to flee. By this one act, a princess defied her own father, the king. But power, when one is born into a royal family, is also a cage. Saul forced her into marriage with another man. Years later, having become king, David took her back, tearing Michal away from a husband who followed her weeping along the road. And their love for its part did not survive. The day David danced fervently before the ark of God, Michal despised him from her window. That contempt sealed her solitude. She remained without child until the end of her days. Michal embodies a bitter truth. One can be born with all the privileges of power and never deep down have been free to choose one's own life. But if Michal was a prisoner of her rank, the next woman knew how to turn intelligence into a weapon capable of stopping an army. Number 13, Abigail, the wisdom that prevented a massacre. She was married to a senseless man, Nabal, a rich landowner, brutal and arrogant. And one day, out of pure pride, he gravely insulted David and his warriors, who had nonetheless protected his flocks. David flew into a black fury. He gathered 400 armed men and swore to wipe out the entire household of Nabal before daybreak. Blood was about to flow. It was then that Abigail entered the story. Without saying anything to her husband, she loaded donkeys with bread, wine, meat, and fruit and rushed to meet the avenging army. She threw herself at David's feet and, with words of astonishing wisdom, disarmed his anger. She reminded him of who he was, the anointed of God, and begged him not to stain his hands with needless blood. David stopped short. He blessed her for having kept him from committing the irreparable. Soon after, Nabal died, and David took Abigail as his wife. Here is a woman who, by her words alone, accomplished what entire armies could not have done: stop a man marching toward murder. Abigail's power rested neither on a throne nor on a sword, but on the wisdom and the courage to speak at the right moment. And since we are speaking of women who changed the destiny of a man, here now is the one who changed the destiny of an entire people, even though she did not belong to that people. Number 12, Rahab, the foreigner who tipped the destiny of Israel. She lived in Jericho, behind the ramparts of the cursed city that the Israelites were preparing to destroy. Rahab was not an Israelite. She was a Canaanite, a woman whose reputation was anything but honorable in the eyes of society. And yet it was in her hands that the destiny of the conquest rested. When two Israelite spies slipped into the city, it was at Rahab's house that they found refuge. The king of Jericho learned of it and demanded that she hand them over. Rahab then made a choice that would change everything. She hid the spies under stalks of flax on her roof, lied to the king's soldiers, and saved the lives of these men. In exchange, she obtained a promise: when the city fell, she and her family would be spared. The agreed sign was a scarlet cord hung from her window. When the ramparts of Jericho collapsed, only the house of Rahab remained standing. But the story does not stop there. This foreign woman, despised, was integrated into the people of Israel. And far more than that, she became an ancestress of King David, and thus an ancestor of the Messiah himself. A Canaanite inscribed in the most sacred lineage in all the Bible. Rahab teaches us that power can arise where no one expects it, in the courage of a single decision. But if Rahab acted by cunning and boldness, the next woman wielded a far more silent power, that of prayer. Number 11, Hannah, the prayer that brought a prophet into the world. She had neither crown nor army nor wealth. Hannah had only an immense pain: she could not have a child. In her world, it was a shame that broke women. Year after year, she went up to the sanctuary of Shiloh, her heart torn. And one day, in a distress so deep that her lips moved without any sound coming out, she made a vow to God. If she received a son, she would consecrate him entirely to him. The priest Eli, seeing her, thought she was drunk. But Hannah answered him that she was simply pouring out her soul before the Lord. And her prayer was heard. She brought a son into the world. She called him Samuel. And faithful to her promise, as soon as he was weaned, she brought him to the sanctuary and entrusted him to God for his whole life. Measure the power of this act. This child, Samuel, would become one of the greatest prophets of Israel, the one who would anoint the first kings, Saul and then David. By offering her only son, Hannah shaped the destiny of an entire nation. Hannah's power was that of faith and renunciation, a strength that the powerful never understand. And from the faith of a mother, let us now pass to the voice of a woman who dared to sing before the sea and to defy the greatest prophet of all. Number 10, Miriam, the first of the prophetesses. Before her, never had a woman borne this title. Miriam, the elder sister of Moses, was the first to be called a prophetess in all the Bible. Her story begins with an act of quiet courage. When her mother placed the baby Moses in a basket on the Nile to save him from the massacre ordered by Pharaoh, it was little Miriam who watched over her brother from afar. It was she who, with astonishing boldness, dared to speak to Pharaoh's daughter so that the child would be returned to his own mother. Decades later, when the Hebrews crossed the sea on dry ground and the Egyptian army was swallowed up, it was Miriam who took up a tambourine and led all the women in a song of victory. She was a leader, a voice the people followed. But power has its temptations. One day, Miriam challenged the unique authority of Moses, claiming her own share of glory. The punishment was immediate. She was struck with leprosy, and it was Moses himself who begged God to heal her. Miriam reminds us that even the highest spiritual authority must remain humble. She reigned over hearts by her song, but learned that no one places himself above the calling received. And from this woman of the desert, let us turn to another foreigner whose faithfulness built, without her knowing it, a royal dynasty. Number 9, Ruth, the faithfulness that founded a line of kings. She was a widow, a Moabite, a foreigner to Israel, without land, without future. When her husband died, nothing held her to her mother-in-law, Naomi, herself a widow and broken. Yet when Naomi decided to return to her country, Ruth spoke one of the most beautiful declarations of loyalty ever written. "Where you go, I will go. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God." She gave up everything, her homeland, her gods, her past, to follow an aged woman toward an unknown country. In Israel, to survive, Ruth gleaned the forgotten ears of grain in the fields. It was there that she drew the attention of Boaz, a rich and righteous man. By her dignity and her courage, she won his respect, then his hand. But here is the true hidden power of this story. From the union of Ruth and Boaz was born a son from whom descended King David, the greatest king of Israel. And from this same lineage would be born, much later, the Messiah. A foreigner, a widow with nothing, became the ancestress of kings. Ruth's power was that of faithfulness, that quiet strength which passes through the generations. But let us now leave the paths of the humble to enter the palace of a sovereign whose wealth and intelligence made the wisest of kings tremble. Number 8, the Queen of Sheba, the sovereign who put King Solomon to the test. She reigned over a distant kingdom, rich in gold, in spices, and in precious stones. The Queen of Sheba was not a submissive princess. She was a monarch in her own right, who governed her people and conducted her own affairs. Now there reached her the rumor of the extraordinary wisdom of a king of Israel named Solomon. And instead of marveling at it from afar, she did what no queen dared. She undertook an immense journey at the head of a caravan laden with treasures to come and put him to the test in person. She assailed him with difficult questions, with riddles meant to probe the depth of his mind. And Solomon answered everything. Nothing remained hidden from him. Before the wisdom and the splendor of the king, the Queen of Sheba, the text says, had her breath taken away. But make no mistake, this woman had not come to bow down. She had come to assess an equal. She offered gifts of untold value and received gifts as precious before returning to her kingdom. The Queen of Sheba embodies a rare power, that of a woman who reigned over nations and who nonetheless placed the quest for wisdom above gold. And from a queen come from afar, let us now return to the heart of the kingdom of Israel, to a woman whose destiny passed from scandal to the summit of power. Number 7, Bathsheba, from scandal to the throne. Her story begins in shame. One evening, King David caught sight of her from his terrace as she was bathing. He had her brought. She was the wife of another, the faithful soldier Uriah. From this fault was born an immense scandal, and to conceal it, David sent Uriah to certain death on the battlefield. Bathsheba lost her husband, then the child born of this union. One might have thought her story finished, broken by the faults of the powerful. But Bathsheba was not a woman to disappear. She became the wife of David and gave birth to another son, Solomon. And it is there that her true power revealed itself. When the old King David was dying, another of his sons tried to seize the throne. It was Bathsheba who entered the royal chamber, who reminded the king of his promise, and who obtained that Solomon, her son, be crowned. Having become queen mother, she held a place of honor that no one contested, seated at the very right hand of the king. The one who had begun as the object of a king's desire became the one who made kings. Bathsheba shows us that a destiny can rise from the worst wounds to reach the summit. But the power of words and thrones sometimes gave way to a far more brutal power. For the next woman did not save a life by wisdom. She won a war with her own hands. Number 6, Jael, the hand that finished off a general. The army of Israel faced the fearsome General Sisera and his 900 iron chariots. When the battle turned, Sisera, the powerful war chief, fled alone, on foot, terrified, seeking a refuge. He found it under the tent of a woman named Jael. She welcomed him, reassured him, covered him with a blanket. He asked her for water. She offered him milk. Exhausted, trusting, the general fell into a deep sleep, certain he was safe. It was then that Jael accomplished the unthinkable. She seized a tent peg and a hammer, approached without a sound, and drove the peg through the temple of the sleeping general, nailing him to the ground. With a single act, a woman had just finished off the one a whole army dreaded. The war was over. In the song of victory that followed, Jael was celebrated as blessed among women. Her act, brutal, was perceived as a deliverance for her oppressed people. Jael's power was that of absolute boldness in an instant when everything was at stake. And since we are speaking of this war, it is time to meet the one who commanded it, the woman whose authority surpassed that of all the generals. But before her, let us plunge into the darkness, to a queen who shed the blood of her own family to seize a throne. Number 5, Athaliah, the woman who seized the throne by blood. She was the daughter of the 2 darkest sovereigns of Israel. And when her own son, the king, was killed, Athaliah did not weep. She saw an opportunity. To reign alone, she had to eliminate all the heirs to the throne. So Athaliah did what no queen had ever dared. She ordered the massacre of the entire royal line, including her own grandchildren. She wanted to erase the whole lineage of David to sit alone on the throne of Judah. And she succeeded. For 6 years, Athaliah reigned as absolute master, the only woman ever to have governed the kingdom of Judah as sole sovereign. A power seized in the most terrible blood there is. But one detail had escaped her. An infant, little Joash, had been saved from the massacre and hidden in the temple by his aunt. For 6 years, the child grew up in the shadows, unknown to the queen. Then, the high priest organized an uprising. The child was crowned in secret, and Athaliah, understanding the betrayal too late, was dragged out of the temple and executed. Athaliah embodies power in its most naked and most chilling form, the will to reign at any cost. But a throne built on blood never holds for long. And if Athaliah killed for power, the next woman went further still. She declared war on heaven itself. Number 4, Jezebel, the queen who wanted to erase God. Her name has become, across the centuries, a synonym for manipulation and cruelty. Jezebel, a foreign princess, married the king of Israel and brought with her her gods and her iron will. But Jezebel was not content to practice her own religion. She wanted to impose it on an entire people. She financed hundreds of priests of her god Baal and set out to have the prophets of the God of Israel executed, hunted down, and slaughtered at her order. She sought to erase the faith of an entire nation. The great prophet Elijah himself had to flee before her fury, hiding in the desert, terrified by this woman who swore his death. And her thirst for power knew no limit. When a man named Naboth refused to give up his vineyard to the king, Jezebel orchestrated false testimony, had the innocent man accused and stoned, simply to offer a garden to her husband. But justice finally caught up with her. During a revolt, Jezebel was thrown down from a window, and her reign of terror ended in the most brutal way. Jezebel remains the most dreaded woman in the Bible, the one who dared to raise earthly power against heaven itself. But at the exact opposite of this destructive queen stands a woman who wielded an authority just as total, and who used it to save, not to destroy. Number 3, Deborah, the woman who led an entire nation. In an age when power belonged exclusively to men, a woman rose up and governed an entire people. Deborah did not bear only one title. She held them all. She was a prophetess, transmitting the word of God. She was a judge, the only woman to exercise this supreme function, rendering justice, seated beneath her palm tree, where the people of Israel came from everywhere to seek her verdicts. And when the hour of war struck, she became a war leader. For in the face of the enemy's oppression, it was Deborah who summoned the general Barak and transmitted to him the divine order to raise an army. And here is the most revealing detail of all her authority. Barak, the military commander, refused to go to battle without her. He told her plainly, "If you go with me, I will go, but if you do not go, I will not go." A general who could not advance without the presence of a woman. The victory was total. And Deborah then composed a song of triumph that still resounds today as one of the most ancient poems in the Bible. Deborah united in a single person's spiritual power, judicial power, and military power. No man of her time possessed such authority. And yet, as immense as her reign over a nation was, the woman who comes now accomplished something even greater. She saved an entire people from extermination. Number 2, Esther, the queen who saved her people from annihilation. Remember Vashti, the deposed queen with whom we began. It was to replace her that a young Jewish orphan was chosen from among all the women of the empire. Her name was Esther, and she carefully hid her origins. Having become queen of Persia, Esther lived in the luxury of the palace. But the shadow of death loomed. A powerful minister named Haman, consumed by hatred, had obtained from the king a decree ordering the extermination of all the Jews of the empire, men, women, and children. The destiny of an entire people now rested on the shoulders of a single woman. But to appear before the king without being invited was punishable by death, even for the queen. Esther chose courage. After 3 days of fasting, she spoke these words that have become immortal, "And if I must perish, I will perish." She advanced toward the king, risking her life. With admirable intelligence and patience, she organized 2 banquets, won the king's favor, then unveiled Haman's plot, and finally revealed that she herself was Jewish. The king's anger turned against the minister. Haman was executed, and the Jewish people was saved from annihilation. Even today, this deliverance is celebrated every year. Esther teaches us that power sometimes finds its meaning in a single instant of courage. Perhaps she had been told, "You have become queen for precisely a moment like this." To save an entire nation, that is a dizzying power. And yet, there exists a strength even greater. For the woman who holds the first place on this list did not save a people. She changed the history of the entire world. Number 1, Mary, the young girl whose single word transformed the world. And here we are at the summit. But here, no more throne, no more army, no more crown or wealth. The most powerful woman in all the Bible was a simple young girl from an obscure village, Nazareth, without any power in the eyes of the world. Remember the promise made at the very beginning of this video. A single word spoken by this young girl would weigh more heavily than all the empires combined. Here it is. An angel appeared to her and announced the impossible. She, a virgin, would give birth to the Son of God, to the Messiah awaited for centuries. Understand the dizziness of that instant. The whole weight of the history of salvation rested on the answer of an adolescent girl. She could have refused. She could have feared dishonor, rejection, the incomprehension of all. But Mary simply spoke these words, "I am the handmaid of the Lord. Let it be done to me according to your word." This yes changed everything. Through it entered into the world the one who would transform humanity forever. And Mary was not merely a silent instrument. She proclaimed a prophetic song in which she announced that God would cast down the powerful from their thrones and lift up the humble. She followed her son to the foot of the cross, standing when nearly all had fled. She endured the greatest pain a mother can know, without ever denying her faith. That is why Mary holds the first place. Her power came not from conquest, but from surrender. Not from strength, but from trust. The greatest power in all the Bible was not to seize a throne, but to say yes to God, and to carry, in total fragility, the hope of the entire world. And there we are. We have reached the end of this journey through the most powerful women in all the Bible. We began with Vashti, who dared to say no. We met Michal, prisoner of her rank, and Abigail, whose wisdom stopped a massacre. We saw Rahab change the destiny of Israel, Hannah bring a prophet into the world through prayer, and Miriam raise the first song of victory. We followed the faithfulness of Ruth, the intelligence of the Queen of Sheba, and the rise of Bathsheba. We shuddered before the boldness of Jael, the cruelty of Athaliah, and the fury of Jezebel. Then we admired the total authority of Deborah, the saving courage of Esther, and finally the overwhelming humility of Mary. 15 women, 15 forms of power. Some reigned by force, others by cunning, others still by faith. And that is perhaps the most beautiful lesson of all. True power depends neither on a crown nor on an army. It lives in the courage to say no, in the wisdom to speak at the right moment, in the faithfulness that never gives up, and in the trust to say yes to something greater than oneself. A strength that remains, even today, within the reach of each one of us. So I turn to you. Of all these women, which has marked you the most? Which embodies, in your eyes, the highest form of power? And above all, have I forgotten one you would have placed on this list? Sarah, the mother of nations who laughed in disbelief before believing. Mary Magdalene, the first to announce the resurrection. Or else Elizabeth, who bore the forerunner. Tell me in the comments, your reflections are always fascinating to read. If this plunge into the destinies of these women touched you, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming explorations, there where history and the sacred meet. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for journeying all the way to the end with me today. May the light always shine on your path, and may peace be with you.